Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the F1 Breakdown podcast. I'm Jack George Mader, the news and blog writer at F1 Breakdown. And at the moment, F1 is in silly season. We're already in the summer break. We've already had 2 weeks of the summer break and we still have 2 weeks until the Belgium Grand Prix. So I thought it was a perfect time to start the podcast simply because there's not much news coming out in the F1 world because everyone's still really on their summer break that they've well deserved from the first intense, really, 11 rounds. So I was going to start off with the racing so far and the races itself, and I was going to start off with what I thought was the best Grand Prix so far this season. And for me it was the Chinese Grand Prix, simply because, in the closing stages we had so many cars in close company with each other. We had from about 2nd to 11th, we had cars within 6 or 7 seconds of each other. And we had, like, Raikkonen, second place he was, and he went on that two-stop strategy. And towards the end of the race, he was easy pickings for everybody else. And because there was so many cars in close company, because Lotus had made that error in the strategy, he just fell backwards and fell out of points, which is, really interesting to see how the tyres were going to play a big role in this season, and they really have played a big role in this season. But what else I was interested in with the Chinese Grand Prix is that the close battles throughout the whole field, throughout the whole race. But, you'd have one battle being shown on the TV screens, and something might happen, but something might not happen in that action, but then we'd miss another action pack somewhere else, just a couple of seconds behind, simply because there were so many cars in close company with each other that you couldn't stop at the TV screen, you couldn't stare at one battle, you had to keep an eye on everything, and it's impossible to keep an eye on everything. So it was an absolutely entertaining race for me, and obviously that was Nico Rosberg's maiden win in F1 after 111 races, which was really good to see because Rosberg has deserved a Formula 1 win throughout his career, but Mercedes have not really gone on from Chinese Grand Prix. They've really gone downhill. You could say the exception was Monaco when Schumacher got the pole position, but really and truly Mercedes have, since China, have not really been there. But there's been other good races as well, though. We had the Malaysian Grand Prix with Alonso and Perez was hounding down Fernando Alonso, and it was unbelievable to watch. And then he got that team radio message. And all the conspiracy theories, leading up to that, don't pass, you're overtaking, don't pass Fernando Alonso, all the conspiracy theories that we had with that, and Perez making that mistake in turn 14, all the conspiracy theories that he made it on purpose to allow Ferrari to win, don't overtake the engine supply that we have, and all that rubbish. Really and truly, I think Perez just made a mistake. He's only young. The pressure of going for that first win, and he was pushing Fernando Alonso and gaining on him around 2 seconds a lap. He had so much more confidence, but I reckon that inexperience might have just paid dividends to him finishing second instead of finishing first. But again, the British Grand Prix was another fantastic Grand Prix. You had a Webber and Alonso in real close company. You had Alonso, first of all, controlling the race, it seemed. He was on the prime tyre at the beginning of the race, which was real and truly the best race tyre at the British Grand Prix. But at the end of the Grand Prix with the Ferrari strategy, he was on the option tyre, which, Lewis Hamilton proved was not the tyre to be on in that race. You wanted to be off that as soon as possible. Hamilton only did 8 laps on that set of tyres. So Webber was hounding him down towards the end of the race and overtook him. And it was really surprising because Alonso, throughout the whole of that Grand Prix, until the last stint, was controlling that race. He was by far the fastest. And then as soon as the option tyres came on, and the others were on the prime, he was, easy pickings. And Webber went on to win the race, and win his second race of the season, which was, fantastic. Because he also won in the Monaco Grand Prix. And there was also other races which were fantastic. We had the Valencian Grand Prix, the European Grand Prix, which was an absolutely fantastic race. And with Valencia known really and truly for boring races, it was an absolutely fantastic race. We had that safety car which brought the whole pack together. Then we had the drama of Sebastian Vettel retiring, because he was really and truly, yet again, like Fernando Alonso at Silverstone, he was controlling that race. He was miles in front. He was 20 seconds clear. It looked like it was an easy, dominant victory that we've seen Vettel do for the last 2 years. And then his engine goes, or the alternator goes, whatever you want to call it. And it was just fantastic because the drama was there. And then, Alonso took the lead from starting in 11th, and the Spanish crowd going wild. It was an absolute fantastic race. And then you had also Grosjean going out with the same issue, apparently, with Sebastian Vettel, with the alternator going. And then you had, at the end, you had Pascal Maldonado and Lewis Hamilton colliding. in the second to last lap, and then that allowed Michael Schumacher, of all people, to step up into third place and pick up his first podium since his return to Formula One in 2010, which has been really and truly for Michael Schumacher a long time coming, I feel, because especially this season he's had so much bad luck. He could have finished second place in China, alongside his teammate, but that bad pit stop and he lost the rear wheel on the track. He just had so much bad luck. And also, what other Grand Prix have been fantastic. Really true that they're the ones that stand out for me, but the races where there has been some controversy is the Hungarian Grand Prix and the Monaco Grand Prix. Now, the Hungarian Grand Prix I'm going to start off first, because people may say, how has that been a controversial race? How is that not as entertaining as the other races? And I reckon this has really and truly come from the new generation of F1 fans that we've accumulated this season due to the high amount of drama we've had and the high amount of entertainment and, just in that sense, because we've seen that throughout the whole season. That's what we've witnessed. So much drama, and a Hungarian Grand Prix didn't really give us that much drama. It did give us drama with Raikkonen and Hamilton at the end, but we're normally used to seeing the car behind catching the car in front, overtaking, but that didn't happen in the Hungarian Grand Prix. It was a really old-fashioned Formula One race that I remember from years ago. And I'm only 17, so, going through the generation of the beginning from the early century in 2000, that was what racing was like. You really had to hustle that car in order to get round, and Raikkonen was doing that. I'm not saying Raikkonen wasn't hustling that car, he was, but just because of the strategy and just because of the racetrack, they weren't able to catch each other. And I reckon that was why the Hungarian Grand Prix got on saying that it wasn't one of the best races, simply because it didn't provide the entertainment, it didn't provide the overtaking right at the end of the race. There was no entertainment, if you wanted to say, from that race. But for me, there was loads of entertainment in that race, because I've been watching Formula One for years, and that's what used to get me going for Formula One, why I wanted to watch it, because was he going to catch him? And to me, that was a really good race, but there has been controversy with it, because saying it was not as good as a race. And the only other race, really and truly, was the Monaco Grand Prix. Now, I always understand that in the Monaco Grand Prix, there's hardly going to be any overtaking manoeuvres, and it's really rare to see one, which is true, and it can be boring watching an hour and 40 minutes of the Monaco Grand Prix and nothing really happening. But yet again, for me, once you go on board with the drivers at Monaco, it becomes a class act, because you're so minimal for error at Monaco, and they're threading it through at 160 miles per hour, going through the swimming pool chicane, flicking left and right. And if they make a mistake, or if the car makes a mistake, like Sergio Perez in qualifying, it just didn't stay and he goes straight into the wall, because as soon as one error, it might be as slight as a fraction out, and that's it, you hit the wall. There is no margin for error at Monaco, which makes it entertaining, because you don't know if someone's going to make a mistake. But if no one does make a mistake, then yes, it is kind of boring and kind of frustrating to watch for an hour and 40 minutes. But for me, it always has to be on the calendar, because you never know what's going to happen at the Monaco Grand Prix, which is why it should be on the calendar, I say. But people say it shouldn't be on the calendar because it's boring, but I disagree with that, to be honest with you. And really true, that sums up the racing so far this season. It's been absolutely entertaining. I'm going to quickly talk about why I reckon it's become so entertaining this season. I'm only going to spend a short time on it. But really true, I think there's been two major factors of it, which is the exit of the rear-blown diffusers, which Red Bull mastered last season, and the Pirelli tyres, and how the Pirelli tyres have made a huge impact on this year's Grand Prix. But firstly, the rear-blown diffusers, I reckon because it's now been taken away and everyone's learnt from it last season, everyone sort of knows how to do it now, because despite the financial issues, the people at Red Bull are really smart, but the people at Force India, Williams and Sauber are just as smart as the people at Red Bull. So Red Bull obviously had the finance to go and master it, whereas Sauber and Force India, Williams probably didn't have the money to go and master it as well as Red Bull. But as soon as it's been taken away, and as soon as they all go into the same way and try to make sure we get it back again, that's why I reckon the pack's been so close this season with the exit of the rear-blown diffuser, which has made obviously the entertaining Grand Prix that we've had. And then the Pirelli tyres. Now, to me, I'm a big fan of the Pirelli tyres, but I still will criticise them, because I do think they are taking too much away from the actual racing. And I agree with Michael Schumacher when he criticised the Pirelli tyres after the Spanish Grand Prix, saying that like the raw eggs, and racing should be about pushing and hustling the car to the limits, which what really and truly Michael Schumacher had to do in his previous campaign in Formula 1. But indeed, you have to save those tyres in order to preserve them, in order to last, and he doesn't like that. And to be honest with you, I don't reckon many racing drivers would like that, preserving the tyres, because they've come up throughout the whole feeder series from when they were go-karting, from GP2, GP3, Formula Ford, Formula Renault, and they were hustling that car, and they were pushing it to the limit, and then they get into Formula 1, and then they're going to have to change their driving style just for the tyres. And you'd probably say, well, yes, they are the best drivers in the world, they should be able to adapt. But it's kind of weird, like for Pastor Maldonado, he says, that all he's done throughout his GP2 career is hustle the car, and that's all he knows, and that's how he feels he should drive. That's why he's a very aggressive driver. And it's probably the same with Lewis Hamilton when he came into sport. He was very aggressive, and they get that aggressive nature, because in order to get into Formula 1, you need to be at the top in all those feeder series, really, to get noticed. And the only way you're going to do that is by aggressive driving. But with the Pirelli tyres, aggressive driving it makes you pit more, really and truly. That's what Michael Schumacher was getting on. If you were to drive aggressive and go for the overtakes, you'd have to make that extra stop, and you just lose all that time anyway, and it's just pointless. Which I agree on. And going to the Hungarian Grand Prix, lap 6, I believe it was, Fernando Alonso was saving his tyres, and Kyron Pilby, Mark Webber's race engineer, told Mark that Alonso was saving his tyres, but there was no instruction from Kyron Pilby to tell Webber, go and overtake him. Now he's saving his tyres, he won't be running as quick, he'll be really slow in the corners because he'll be nursing the car. It was more of nurse the car with him, and then in that stage everyone's nursing their tyres, and the race goes through a boring stage where nothing's happening, because cars are in close company with each other, they're running within a couple of seconds at the beginning of the race, and no one's trying to go for an overtaking move, because they're trying to prolong the stint to maximise their race strategy, which can get kind of boring, whereas Michael Schumacher said he wants to overtake, but he knows the consequences of those overtakes are just too high. And we've seen, even in the race strategy, say like Montreal Grand Prix, where Hamilton did that second stop, and he went all the way to the front. That's what I like about the Pirelli tyres. It gives that element of risk. The risk of the engineers thinking, okay, if we do this, can we get better than what we were doing? Because Ferrari and Vettel, Red Bull thought that the one stop would work, and then because Hamilton did that two-stop strategy, they had to really rethink. Red Bull did eventually stop Sebastian Vettel, but Fernando Alonso stayed out. And Hamilton, that was fantastic to watch, because he was like the older generation of Formula 1. Hamilton was aggressive, he was attacking that car at every corner in order to overtake, really, and get to the front of the grid, and that's what he did. And then he passed Vettel, and he passed Alonso, and went on to win. And Vettel realised, we could get Fernando Alonso if we pit. And they did. They pitted, and they got Fernando Alonso right towards the end of the Grand Prix. So I like the element of risk that, Formula 1 drivers and the teams have to make with the tyres. And it's great that they haven't understood them, because I reckon because they haven't understood the tyres in the first really 8-9 rounds, I think they're now starting to get a hold on the tyres. But that was the reason why we had so many unpredictable races, which has been fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed the seasons before previous seasons without the DRS and KERS as well. But the entertainment and drama factor had been like no other really this season. But despite the Pirelli tyres maybe having a real big effect on Formula 1 so far this season, I still think they've been a big positive for Formula 1, and they have really brought the racing much closer together, and it has been much more entertaining with the Pirelli tyres. But anyway, I'm going to move on now. I'm going to move on to the teams. I'm going to talk about 3 teams really in this podcast for a little bit. I'm going to talk about Ferrari, Mercedes and Caterham. I'm going to start off with Ferrari, obviously, because Ferrari at the beginning of the season obviously had a horrific start. They had a really poor car, and they were going nowhere at the beginning of the season. They just about got into Q2 at Melbourne. Alonso making that mistake, the car was undrivable, and now they're winning races. Ferrari are up there, Massa's even up there now, and Alonso's been absolutely fantastic. But what has really surprised me, and it has happened for the last couple of seasons, is cars finding 2 to 3 seconds throughout the duration of the season to get their car back up to the field. It normally happens with the more established, probably richer teams like Ferrari and McLaren. But there's always been that saying that it takes millions of pounds and so much effort to even get half a tenth or a second in one season. But, Ferrari are doing that in a quarter of a season. They found 3 seconds in order to get their car to winning ways, which, comes to say that saying where a second may take a season, it kind of like nullifies it. And to be honest with you, if you go back to 2009, this happened before with Ferrari and McLaren. They both started with really bad cars. They, didn't get grips to the new regulations that were in 2009, and they had a really poor car, but they put the resources in, and by the end of the season, McLaren winning races, Hamilton was winning races, and Raikkonen for Ferrari won the Belgium Grand Prix, which we're going to in 2 weeks, as I said, and they turned it around, and to be from going in Q1, out in Q1 and the early positions in Q2 to winning races in the course of a season, you don't really see that. And you don't really see that from the middle teams. You wouldn't see Force India now where they are at the moment, and then by Abu Dhabi and the American Grand Prix, we're winning races. You never know, it could happen, but to me that's highly unlikely. And that's the way Formula 1 has gone for the last couple of years. And if you think about it, 2010, Ferrari yet again didn't have the best start and got their car up to be challenging for the title, and it was Alonso yet again just pushing that car forward. Same in 2011, Alonso was just pushing that car forward because there was no support from Massa, because Massa was still getting back from his injury and was really low in confidence, really and truly, because Ferrari was giving all their resources to Fernando Alonso. And we saw that, we knew that in 2010 German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, where Felipe Massa was leading that Grand Prix and leading that Grand Prix deservedly, and they told Rob Smedley, Felipe Massa's race engineer, told Felipe Massa that he virtually had to move over. Fernando was faster than you, and Fernando goes through, and Felipe was winning that race. Now, that would have been a really interesting race to watch. Could Fernando overtake Felipe Massa on merit? Maybe he could have, maybe he couldn't, but we'd never know because Ferrari did it for us. But that would have been really good, and I reckon if Felipe Massa won that race, we probably would see a different Felipe Massa, because that would have knocked the confidence out of him. He's at the beginning of that season, the confidence would be starting to come back from after that accident at Budapest and qualifying in 2009. But he was winning that race, and I reckon that would have shot his confidence to rock bottom virtually. Being told, proven that the team do not have faith in you; they have faith in Alonso. And because he had that slow start, and he just plummeted in 2011. He probably thought, I need to challenge, but then, challenging with Alonso with the form he's been in. To be honest with you, I don't think any driver. I reckon you put Vettel in there and he'd have a hard time. You'd put Hamilton there and he'd have a hard time. Hamilton in 2007 outperformed Fernando Alonso, but with the form Fernando Alonso is and the way he's matured over the last couple of seasons, I think no driver could really match Fernando Alonso, and I think he'd outclass anyone. And I just think Felipe Massa has been a bit unlucky, and we've seen Felipe Massa really improve how the seasons progress. And I reckon this season he knew his seat was up for grabs. He knew he was the biggest talking point throughout the whole of the season. So he thought to himself, maybe if he had a car at the beginning of the season that worked, that was there to challenge for wins and make him challenge for the title, I reckon he would have been there with Fernando. Maybe not because Fernando's on the best form, I reckon, in his Formula 1 career. Even better when he was racing Schumacher for his World Championships that he got. I think he's driving better than he was then in 2005 and 2006. But I reckon if Massa had that car to challenge, he would have been up there, and I reckon we'd be writing different stories today about Felipe Massa, how Felipe Massa's turned it around. But because that car was not up to it, and he probably would have thought in his head, how am I going to prove myself? How am I going to prove my worth in this team? And I know some of you may say now, oh, well, if he did much overtaking and forced himself up through the field, which he didn't do, which Fernando Alonso did to get into those positions, and yeah. But when your confidence is shot, and when Ferrari are putting their resources really and truly into Fernando Alonso, that's not really going to happen. I don't think that would happen for anyone. If you just say you weren't with Fernando Alonso, just say, I don't know, you were with a friend in a Formula 1 car, just say you and another friend of yours was in a Formula 1 car, and the team was putting more of emphasis onto your friend, you wouldn't feel that great, because you'd think, oh, he's getting all the upgrades first, he's getting the quicker car, and you'd be sitting in qualifying thinking, is that car identical to this one? And you'd probably doubt yourself, and say it's not. And then therefore he's going into probably the mindset, because of what Ferrari have done to him, going, I don't have the same car as Fernando Alonso, and this is why I'm a second off. And he might not be true, it might be slightly different, it might be identical, but because the way Felipe Massa has been treated at Ferrari, you can't, it's really hard for him to think that, in that mindset, that he is equal with Fernando Alonso. I struggle to get my words out there, but it's tough, and I'm just, I'm getting a bit emotional on it, because, Felipe Massa, I like Felipe Massa, I'm a fan of most drivers, but you gotta feel sorry for him, because, the way he's been treated at Ferrari, to me, is wrong. You don't treat a team member like that. And that's why I think Ferrari haven't, not won a Constructors' Championship in such a long time. Because I don't feel the way they run their team, I don't think they deserve to win it. Because I reckon if they gave Massa that equal opportunity, or even if they didn't, say what is going on as it is now, but they told Massa that it's an equal car, and then he'd see Alonso beating him, I reckon he'd push himself. And he might push himself, I don't know, he might just go down in the dumps like he is now. We'll never know, but just say, Felipe Massa, he could have pushed himself to get closer to Alonso, and he might have improved. But whereas he knows that he is the number 2 driver for Ferrari, he thinks, well, I'm 8 tenths behind Alonso, but I know that car's faster than my one. So what's the point? I don't think I did a bad job for myself today. Which is true, but now you see Felipe Massa has gone up for the field. Ferrari is there, in Silverstone he had a very good race, finishing 4th. It was a very strong performance. Monaco, yet again, was another strong performance for Felipe Massa. He was really going for it throughout the whole weekend, throughout the practice sessions, qualifying sessions, and the race itself. He was showing that he was there. He needs a car to perform, and every Formula 1 driver needs a car to perform. Look at Michael Schumacher, 7-time world champion. We're all used to seeing him dominate race wins, but that Mercedes is not up to it. So he's not going to win races. He's not going to be up there like we used to see. And the car is really and truly a major factor in Formula 1. The driver can make a huge influence. Obviously, we can see that. You've seen it with Michael Schumacher in the past. You see it with Fernando Alonso today. Just making a huge impact on the car itself and just forcing it up the field. Which is, fantastic to see. But I still think Felipe Massa, if Ferrari gave him a car at the beginning of the season to perform, he would perform at a high level. And, well, I'm going to talk about who probably would replace Felipe. To be honest with you, I can't see Felipe being replaced, simply because I don't know who they're going to go for. And all the talk now has come with Heikki Kovalainen, because Mark Webber's signed. I can't see Lewis Hamilton or Jenson Button deciding to move to Ferrari, although you've seen all the newspapers and all the articles of, a move for Jenson Button, or even a move for Hamilton, but I can still seeing the British partnership staying at McLaren. And then who else? Vettel says, I'm not interested in going. Then, Nico Rosberg and Schumacher, they're not going to, well, Schumacher's not going to move to Ferrari. I think Schumacher will stay to Mercedes. Whether he'll be in a Formula 1 car next season is yet to be confirmed. I reckon he will be, because I reckon he wants to obviously do well, Schumacher. And I reckon if the results from the 2013 car look good, I reckon he'll stay. If he sees that they're about the same as it is this season, I reckon he'll retire, because he'll think, I'm not just going to, I want to win, I want to prove to everyone I still have it. I can't prove it in this car. It's the same as Felipe Massa. And if results are going to be similar to next year, I don't see Schumacher starting next year, but if the car will be better and will be fighting for podiums more regularly than it is now, then I reckon Schumacher will still be in that car. But as I said, I reckon Nico and Schumi will be in Mercedes next season. So then the only other option, unless you're going to go for Perez, but I can't see Perez moving to Ferrari, because I don't know if Perez, I reckon Perez will become another Massa in the form of Alonso will get everything, and Sergio will have to play catch-up, which really and truly Perez doesn't deserve. Perez has been driving out of his skin at Sauber, and has, deserved the 2 podiums that he's got. And I don't know if he'd want to change the atmosphere that he's in. So I reckon he'll stay at Sauber. And then everyone's then jumping, maybe Kovalainen. Now Kovalainen would deserve Ferrari seat, I reckon, when we all know that he had a top team seat at McLaren. But yet again, he was young, and he was much younger, and he was kind of inexperienced, because he only came at the same time as Hamilton in 2007, and he had a time at 2008 and 2009. In 2009, the car already wasn't quick enough. and they only got quick enough towards the end of the season. 2008, he won his first race at Budapest at the Hungarian Grand Prix, which shows he has talent, and we all know he has talent, because at Caterham, he's outqualified virtually both of his teammates and outraced them really, and outshone Trulli and Petrov so far this season. So Kovalainen has got the potential to be a really good race driver for Ferrari, but it wouldn't surprise me if Massa was at Ferrari next season, but it wouldn't shock me either if he wasn't. But I'd expect Massa, I reckon he'll have another year contract, just like Mark Webber. I reckon they'll do that to see if they can persuade Mark Webber to join Ferrari the next season, because I think Ferrari don't want Massa to go, but want Massa to go in order for them to win Constructors' Championship. But I reckon how Ferrari they've sort of snookered themselves in how they run their team and how they cooperate with each other. I reckon they've snookered themselves, and I think they have themselves to blame for why they haven't won Constructors' Championships and why they're not performing at a high level. And I would like to hear your views on that. You can comment below, just say, I want to see what you think about Felipe Massa, because that's my opinion on it. You might have a different opinion on it, and I'd love to hear them, get a little debate going. We have a forum on our website, just post something on our forum, just sign up. It's easy to sign up on our forum. You can sign up via Facebook, Twitter, any sort of social media place you can sign up with via our forum. And you have a debate about it. I'd be really interested. I'd get into a debate with someone about it. I'm not going to say I'm going to start an argument with someone. That's not my aim. I just, interested to hear what your views will be. And well, now I'm going to go on to Mercedes. Now, Mercedes, I've sort of touched on them during as I was going on with Ferrari, with Schumacher and Rosberg. But Mercedes have really and truly not cut it. And I said earlier, from the Chinese Grand Prix, they haven't really done anything special, apart from that pole position in Monaco. But I don't think he would have won that race, Michael Schumacher. I don't think he would have won that race. I reckon the car was not quick enough, and the Red Bulls and the McLaren were quick enough during that Grand Prix to overtake him in the pit stops. But then you could say, Nico Rosberg finished second, so maybe he could have won that race, looking at it like that from Nico Rosberg's performance. But you never know what would happen in that Grand Prix, and he retired in that Grand Prix anyway with mechanical difficulties. So, truth saying, whether he started on pole or not, he probably would have got that mechanical problem, and he probably wouldn't have won that race anyway. But going back, let's go back to the start of Mercedes, and you have to go back to 2009 when Mercedes Grand Prix were Brawn GP, and Brawn GP didn't have that much money, and so the resources going into the 2010 car would have been limited to Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, and Ferrari and McLaren made a really bad car, so most of their resources would have gone on to the 2010 car to make sure it was quick, and McLaren did, and it was quick, and Ferrari wasn't too far behind. But with the limited resources probably going into the 2010 car, and Brawn GP didn't really know until November, December time if Mercedes was taking over. Ross Brawn had an inkling that Mercedes was going to take over, whether it was going to happen or not. He didn't know when. And it came towards the end of the season, and Brawn GP, throughout the beginning of the season, had to make cutbacks to the number of staff that they had. So they didn't have the manpower as Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren to compete for 2010. So when Mercedes come in, they're obviously going to have to employ the people to get it to a standard like Ferrari and McLaren, and plus they're going to have to catch up what they've lost throughout the 2009 season. So which you can understand now why in 2010 they weren't really with it, and they were a bit behind. And then in 2011 you thought, okay, this could be a season where they could improve. But the problem with Mercedes, and the problem with, same as with Caterham, which I'll get on later, you can improve, but the teams around you will also improve. And so they did improve, but with other teams improving, they just got a little bit quicker. And it wasn't enough for Mercedes, and they got a couple of podiums with Rosberg, a couple of third places. But for Mercedes, it wasn't quite good enough. You want them to hit the ground running with a big car company such as Mercedes, and such a huge manufacturer it was. But then you could also, link Mercedes to Toyota a little bit, not saying there's no connection between those two teams whatsoever, but Toyota at the end is a huge car manufacturer and was in Formula 1 from 2002 to 2009, and they didn't win the race, and that's a huge car manufacturer, huge base in Japan, and they didn't win a race and they left the sport. Mercedes have won a race, so they've already done better than what Toyota did. But Mercedes in 2012, they haven't stepped forward. They realised where they were slow. They were slow in 2011 on the straights, which was proven in the Montreal Grand Prix, which was one of the best classics ever Formula 1 races, where Button came through from the back of the field to win that race. But Schumacher in the Mercedes was running in second in the changeable conditions in the weather, which was, he'd driven fantastically, and you need to drive fantastically in the changeable conditions. But when the track began to dry out and Webber and Button came through, Schumacher had no option. He was a sitting duck. He wasn't fast enough on those straights, and Webber and Button just went past, and he had nothing to give. He couldn't fight back because the car wasn't quick enough, which is just a shame because he really deserved from that Grand Prix podium, and because the car let him down, and that's what's really been going on. And even this season, the car's let him down again. He's had a few reliability issues. He just had bad luck this season, and I reckon putting those points that he'd lost throughout the season, so like the 18 points he probably lost in China, the points he lost throughout the season, the small little points, he'd be up there, I reckon, with right around Raikkonen area. And he's only 8 points Raikkonen off Mark Webber. So Schumacher, I reckon, would have still been a title contender, even though there was obviously a bit of a gap between Alonso and Webber. But to be honest with you, if Webber is a championship contender, then Raikkonen and Schumacher would have been a championship contender. Because there are only 8 points. If Raikkonen was to win now, say, the Belgian Grand Prix, and Webber was to finish second, Raikkonen will be 1 point behind Webber. So what? Because is now Raikkonen a title contender? Well, he's obviously a title contender going into the Belgian Grand Prix. I know people have written him off, but I'm going a bit off topic here. But that's what I heard. I still think Raikkonen is a serious title contender because I have heard reports, and it's just been laughed off that Raikkonen's a title contender. But he's only 8 points behind Webber. It's only a race win virtually to catch that up. So he's still a title contender, despite what everyone else says. But Mercedes, going back to Mercedes, they just haven't kicked off. And they had that double DRS system, which only really helps in qualifying, when the DRS is open, and when they overtake using the DRS during the Grand Prix, it will help. But Lotus now have got this passive DRS which works on any long straight, and it could really help them in Spa and Monza, which we're going to. Whereas Mercedes don't really have anything. And Mercedes specialised their development because no one understood the tyres. They thought, maybe we should get a hold of their tyres, which they did, and they worked on it because they were really hard on their rear tyres at the beginning of the season. But I don't think that they specialised in the upgrades like Ferrari and McLaren did, which is like a conveyor belt of upgrades going to every Grand Prix. I reckon because Mercedes were focusing on the tyre, that it didn't really come. And therefore, they're behind and, catching up. I don't think they will catch up this season, and I think it's just another season, and I think they just went wrong in the development race. They went for the tyre, but I reckon they could have just stayed with what they knew at the time, because everybody else was sort of in the same boat, and focused on actually upgrades like McLaren and Ferrari, and maybe they could have made an impression going through the field. But really and truly, Mercedes, they need to improve. It's been poor, really and truly. And Russ Braun said it himself, in order to win Constructors' Championships and Drivers' Championships, you can't be quick at one circuit, you can't be quick at two, you need to be quick at all of them. Which is true. And, whatever Mercedes do this season and going into next season, they need to improve. And I reckon they will improve. They've got some good technical people that behind them, they signed Alfredo Costa from Ferrari. And so they've got some good technical people behind them, and you've got them obviously some real smart, intelligent guys working back at the factory. So they should be able to push forward. Whether they'll catch up Ferrari, Lotus, Red Bull and McLaren, we don't know if they'll do it this season. Whether they can do it next season is obviously a possibility. But, they really need to get their act together and get their act together fast. Right, so finally, for today, moving on to Caterham. Now, Caterham have done well this season. I know they're miles away from the Marussias and HRTs. They're lapping them now. So they're miles away from them. But they're still too far away from the Toro Rossos, from the Force Indias. Now, Tony Fernandez and Mike Gascoigne, I reckon, snooking themselves every year. Because they say, we're going to fight for points. We're going to fight with the midfield teams. And it never happens. We're going to fight for Q2. It never happens. Okay, Kovalainen's got into Q2 a couple of times. But the majority of the times he's 7 tenths, 8 tenths away from Q2. And, that's a big gap for someone, for Caterham, when they're saying that they were going to challenge. And so they need to really and truly keep their mouth sort of shut, really. In what numbers may say in the wind tunnel doesn't always replicate on what happens on the track. Ferrari, yet again, I would say Ferrari were just as bad for this. Stefano Domenicali, before the first test session in Jerez, said that the signs were looking good, that Ferrari had made a strong car this season. They got to the test track, the car was awful, and they had a big rethink on what to do. So I reckon Caterham should just, keep their mouth shut until the car gets onto the circuit, because until the car gets onto the circuit, you'll know where you are. But if you say false promises really and truly before you started, before the cars hit the surface, then, you know, you're setting yourself up for a hard time. And Eddie Jordan, on the BBC, they had an interview with John Ivey and another designer at Caterham, and Jake Humphrey was there, and Jake Humphrey just dropped Eddie Jordan right in it and said, Eddie Jordan thinks that you are one of the worst teams in paddock this season, simply because you've said so many things that you wanted to do and you didn't perform, which is correct, they did do that. But it was just really funny because Eddie Jordan was like next to Jake Humphrey when he said that on the BBC, and his face just completely dropped, and it was hilarious to watch because, you know, Eddie Jordan was like, oh, thanks Jake, thanks for that. But it's true, you have to agree with Eddie Jordan. I agree with Eddie Jordan. They have been a disappointment this season, and, you know, they were in a race of their own. I went to the British Grand Prix, and Heikki Kovalainen was the only Caterham in that race because Petrov had an engine failure going through the grid, and he was in the race by himself. Literally, he might as well have been doing time trials and qualifying laps because he had no one to race. He was, as I said, miles behind from the Toro Rossos and miles in front of the Marussias and the HRT. He had no race. He was just doing 52 laps. And I reckon that's what he's done all season. He probably gets into a good little fight with Petrov, and that's probably the only racing he gets with another car. And the rest of the time, he's passing the HRTs on Marussias because he's lapping them, or they're moving over to allow the faster cars to go through, which is a shame really for Caterham because they said we wanted to perform, we want Q2, and it just hasn't happened. And I reckon for the 2013 season, I reckon they could be there now challenging for Q2 maybe by the 2013, but I reckon just in case, I reckon they should really just keep it zipped for a while until the 2013 car hits the track for the first time and they know where they are and they can see from the data that they're collecting on the track instead of what they're going through their computers and their wind tunnels that they have back at their base. Yeah, but that is, you know, pretty much it for this podcast. You can subscribe, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. You know, there'll be a link to the website in the description. You can read some more of my blogs that I produce. You know, have a look at the news stories, what on earth is going on in the world of F1. Not much at the moment, but there was always some little things that are going on. Like I just heard yesterday that, you know, there could be a return to the Turkish Grand Prix. There was no exact date when, but, you know, if they can find a financial agreement with Turkey, then Turkey could return to the racing calendar, which would be interesting because I reckon Turkey, the Istanbul Park in Turkey, is a great track. So yeah, as I said, you can subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and thanks for listening.